So again, multiple layers of meaning. When she's talking about the Christian tradition of veiling, that's something that's very recent until the 60s that was taken away. My mother, who grew up Catholic, would wear a veil to church until the middle 60s. And again, showing kind of these ideas of um, various subject positions. So where she is in relationship to what's around her, but also varying identities within that. So the last one is one of her more recent pieces, Remembering Maracana from Into the Dark series. You can check out the Maracana killing story on Wikipedia. It happened 34 miners were killed on August 16th when the police opened fire on the strikers. So in the early 90s, South Africa finally, apartheid finally fell. And there was participation with the Black population in the government. And eventually, because the Black population is the majority, most of the positions in government were occupied by Black people. But the power and wealth in the country remained with the white population. Most of the land, most of the executive and ownership positions and the private sector were occupied by white people. And much of the hard and difficult work, exploitative work, was being done by the Black population. So these miners had been unionized and they went on strike. And the mining company, in collaboration with the police, kind of tried to characterize the crowd as dangerous. They said that there was shooting. And so then the police started opening fire into the strikers. So this is one of those cases, since it's so late when it was done, that there's a ton of video. People had their phones out and recording video. You can decide for yourself whether or not you think the police were honest. I don't think so, and most people don't. It seemed to be that the police opened fire first. So this kind of shows how, even though what has changed, that in theory, there is a Black majority population in power, that is still not the case. And for everyday South Africans, there is still incredible inequality and incredible differences in material conditions, and certainly not liberation for most of the South African government. So in this one, she's using the coal dust to represent the miners. And then she has these gold, and the gold coins represent the particular type of gold coins that South Africa had exported throughout the world. Gold was one of the big industries, along with diamonds. But these particular coins, called Krugerrands, were used almost as a diplomatic or kind of like a branding for South Africa. So it's a symbol of the wealth concentrated in white hands of South Africa, coming from the exploitation of Black people. So perhaps the most important lesson of Maracana is that the state can gun down dozens of Black workers with little or no backlash from civil society, the judicial system, or from within the institutions that supposedly form the bedrock of democracy. So the Fogel here is talking about the investigation that happened afterwards. It was basically the government officials and the police investigating themselves. And as you might imagine, they, of course, said that they weren't responsible. So what we haven't said is the Farlam Commission, an obvious attempt to clear the state's role in the massacre and prevent any sort of real investigation into the actions of the police on that day. In other words, the state can get away with mass murder with apparent impunity in terms of institutional conceptions of justice and political accountability. So returning to Searle's work, she's using the Krugerrands, the gold coins, and covering her eyes. It's a very old symbol. Some of you are familiar with the Shroud of Turin, which is supposedly the shroud that was over the actual historical Jesus Christ. And in this shroud, like the picture which is embedded on it, it shows the body as being covered with coins. In ancient times and even more recent times, when bodies were displayed. They'd sometimes be covered with coins. It had like ceremonial and wealth type purposes, but also it's had a practical purpose of keeping their eyes closed. And she's showing that, perhaps giving us a Christ-like effect to what had happened to the miners.